Okay, Srisha, you can start.
Okay. Ellarigu namaskara. A very good evening to one and all. Let me begin by introducing myself. I am Shrestha Chaudhary, Research Associate at Environment Support Group. I am happy to welcome all of you to the third webinar in the series, Bangalore's Climate Plan, making it participatory and inclusive, organized by Environment Support Group. This series was conceptualized based on the Bruhat Bengaluru Mahanagara Palike's decision to take action under the Paris Climate Agreement. In each session, we invite leading administrators, experts, and representatives from affected communities to introspect on what the city's climate plan must contain so that the challenges of decarbonization are met equitably and justly. Following the inaugural session on 22nd March, each weekly session interrogates sectoral issues so that a collective action plan can be evolved for making Bengaluru climate. Last week's session on public health, sanitation, and waste management is a decentralized approach the way out, witnessed extensive discussion on decarbonization of consumption and waste in Bengaluru, its impact on health of public, on workers handling waste, and that of communities affected by waste dumping. The session also focused on locally viable solutions like composting at source that could provide citywide positive impacts, including mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions from waste. In today's session, we deal with the topic of making Bengaluru water secure. Pity the water that stays and rises on the streets. Pity the water that floods into houses, so dark and filthy and heavy with rats and dead leaves and plastic. How ashamed water is to be. What have you made it? What have you done it to its beauty? Its graceful body in pictures of oceans, its clear face in a glass? These lines from the poem by Miss Conchinita Cruz in her award-winning book, Dark Hours, reflects what we have done to water, the life-sustaining force of our world. As glaciers melt more rapidly, our metropolises are flooding more every year. It's not hard to imagine water sacred and pure is getting scarce everywhere. This is true for Namma Bengaluru. The metropolis, choking from the effects of unplanned urbanization and growth, has begun to experience impacts of a climate emergency. Numerous studies reveal Bengaluru is heading towards a catastrophic day zero, as half the residents of this 1.3 crore populated metropolis are pushed to rely on private supplies of water, which in turn is based on largely illegal and unsustainable groundwater extraction. For the rest of the population who get piped water supply, it is no better. Over 1,000 million liters of water every day is lifted from almost 100 kilometers away from Kaveri and over 500 meters of elevation. That, while the river that originates in Bengaluru, the Shivabati, has been successfully turned into a sewage canal, while the Arkavati that originates to the north of the metropolis has been driven dry due to extensive sand mining and groundwater extraction. A situation accentuated following the financialization of land north of the metropolis after the international airport was opened there in mid-2000s. Over the past few decades, water commons within the city of lakes has shrunk beyond imagination. Construction of mammoth apartment complexes and tech parks have transformed the open spaces into a concrete jungle, hindering natural processes of water cycle. An insatiable appetite for land has sadly transformed many lakes into bus stands, stadiums, residential layouts, and other forms of infrastructure, making the city even more water hungry. Waterbird numbers have dipped alarmingly, as has that of flora and fauna dependent on wetland ecosystem. Access to water as an indicator of quality of life reveals Bengaluru ranks almost amongst the lowest in cities of global south. Actual availability of water to the poor areas of the city is limited by infrastructure and utter lack of attention. And so for these neighborhoods, the per capita supply is shockingly low. The lack of a political will to ensure equitable distribution of water reaffirms pre-existing water inequalities, which in turn are further intensified by changing climate. With monsoons becoming more erratic and disputes over the sharing of water of River Kaveri remaining unresolved, what is the way forward for Bengaluru to mitigate the impacts of climate change and deliver a water secure future for its residents? In the face of the looming climate crisis, Eleanor Ostrom's work gives hope. By providing that humans can sustainably manage shared resources, this Nobel Prize-winning economist's work throws light on a path that just might help us get out of this mess. She acknowledged that collaborations take time to develop, and they are not always successful. There are no secret recipes for resolving the commons dilemma, no panaceas, as Ostrom liked to say. However, Ostrom identified a set of 8 broad design principles that help collaborative management succeed. These design principles include having clear boundaries, enabling participation in rulemaking, holding users accountable, and resolving conflicts. In some ways, the Paris Climate Agreement aligns with Ostrom's 8 design principles. I will take this opportunity to read Ostrom's 8 design principles for managing commons for the benefit of all. They are: number 1, the physical and social boundaries are clearly defined. Number 2, locally tailored rules define resource access and consumption. Number 3, individuals who are most affected by the rules can participate in rulemaking. Number 4, resource monitors are accountable to resource users. Number 5, graduated penalties can be imposed on rule breakers. Number 6, conflict management institutions are accessible. Number 7, authorities recognize the right to self-organize. And number 8, complex systems are organized into layers of nested governance. In light of such above principles, is decentralization the way forward to tackle climate change? Can decentralized systems of protection of lakes, water harvesting, grey water recycling reduce Bangalore's unsustainable reliance on faraway rivers? Can reviving and rehabilitating the historic network of lakes and canals system with local public involvement fight the current extractive nature of water distribution? Can Bengaluru move towards water security practices that are equitable, gender sensitive, ecologically and socially just? I would also like to draw attention to the public trust doctrine, a long-standing legal principle which holds that certain natural resources, particularly air, water, and the oceans, are central to our very existence and therefore must be protected for the common good. They must not be allowed to be appropriated for private gain. Under the public trust doctrine, governments are custodians who ensure these resources are protected for the long-term use and enjoyment of the entire populace and not just the privileged who can buy inequitable access. The future of water security in Bengaluru definitely needs careful systematic planning. Through today's discussion, our speakers will shed light on how the city can become not just carbon neutral, but water neutral to fulfill the ambitious targets of the Paris Climate Agreement. Our esteemed speakers today include senior representatives from the government, senior lawyer, experts in environmentally sensible architecture, rainwater harvesting, and a wildlife researcher whose family practices water conservation every day and lives off the grid. I thank all our speakers for agreeing to be part of this discussion and making time for it. Before we go further, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping rules. Everyone is requested to keep their phones on silent. All are requested to ensure that they are on mute, except for the speakers. Each of the speakers will be giving a brief intervention of about 8 to 10 minutes. Screen sharing option will be enabled for all the speakers to share their PPT and make the presentation. Once all such interventions are over, we will have a round of question and answers. Anyone wishing to ask a question is requested to do so by posting it in the chat box below. If time permits, we will facilitate direct conversations between speakers and audience. It's my privilege now to introduce our key speaker for the day, Mr. L.K. Atheeq, IAS, Principal Secretary, Rural Development and Panchayat Raj, Government of Karnataka. Mr. Atheeq has 30 years of experience in the government. His earlier positions include being the Principal Secretary to the Chief Minister of Karnataka and as Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's Office. He has also worked as State Project Director of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and as Director of Karnataka Rural Water Supply and Sanitation Agency. He is passionate about sectors like decentralization, rural development, natural resource management, health and education. Of late, particularly during the pandemic, Mr. Atheeq has been crisscrossing the state, motivating communities to come together to protect and rehabilitate village ponds and lakes, and also in building Panchayat Raj institutions to protect commons. Thank you, Mr. Atheeq. I now request you to address our audience for the day, and Varun kindly present Mr. Atheeq's PPT over here.
Thank you, Shrestha. Thank you, Mr. Leo Saldana and all other esteemed speakers for the day. It's curious that on a topic of climate action plan for Bengaluru, a rural development and Panchayat Raj Secretary is speaking. So I will try to make it relevant to Bangalore. But right now, I will speak about my experiences in my area and my sector. So first of all, a disclaimer: I am not a water expert or a groundwater expert. I am a civil servant who has been working on water issues for some time now. Back in 2003 and 2005, I used to be Commissioner for Rural Water Supply and Sanitation Agency. At the Prime Minister's office, I have looked at water issues. I have dealt with water resources, particularly the interstate water disputes, etc. For the last 2.5 years, in the current role as Principal Secretary of Rural Development and Panchayat Raj, we have been focusing on water issues. In fact, when the previous Minister, Rural Development Minister, Mr. Krishna Baragada was there, he and I together conceived of a program, a campaign called Jalamruta. And now I will give a brief overview as to what, in my view, would be the role of local governments in water governance, and how do we really make it happen. So I will directly come to the subject, because I think people who are here already are more than aware of the importance of these issues. So I will not spend too much time on why these issues are important, but straight away come to how we can do what we're supposed to do. Next. So the question that was posed to me the question that was posed to me in Leo's letter was that can I speak about what kind of structural changes in governance are required to involve local governments and public at large in securing water commons. So I will restrict my interventions to try to speak to this question during my 10 minutes presentation. Next. So already Shrestha spoke about Eleanor Ostrom. So the first design principle, according to her, in management of common property resources, is that clear delineation and demarcation of its boundaries and the understanding of its essential features. I would add to this that it is also important to clearly vest the rights and responsibilities over the management of water assets. So next. So what is the problem? The problem is already known, but I'll just spend 30 seconds on this. That according to the Water Resources Group, this is an old report of 2009. There is a 50% projected to be a 50% gap between the demand and supply by 2030, which amounts to 755 billion cubic meters. And the next is a serious inequity in access and control over water resources, and over-exploitation of water, whether it is surface water or groundwater, and leading to a depletion of resources to an unsustainable level. So water, I understand, is a common resource, whether it's surface or groundwater, these are connected, and a serious depletion of groundwater affects the surface, and inadequate surface water affects groundwater, and therefore these are the issues. So how do we really respond to this? There are several technocratic or solutions that experts might give. I will focus on governance. So local governments, in my opinion, can play a role, but why don't they play a role? That is the first question let me address. And my experience is that typically the local governments tend to limit themselves to the role that is given to them, or it is perceived to be given to them. They don't really go beyond, for example, panchayats deal with street lights or drinking water supply, sanitation, roads, and that's all. They never think of, or they never discuss about water except to complain or to give a petition. And therefore, when we want to invest the role or entrust the role of water governance to them, what should we do? And that is the question we need to answer, and that's why I'm raising this issue. So they do not normally, except in some exceptions, take initiative to protect natural resources. They say, I'll come to the reasons why it is so, but they don't do it normally. Some exceptions are there, but normally they don't do. And even when they do, they take an interest in developing it. They look at in a grants, if some grant is there, can we develop it, can we desilt a tank? But they do not, in my experience, look at the issue in a more holistic fashion. And they are not good at demand side management, because it involves asking somebody to not use water so much. And so therefore, that is again an issue that they leave it for the so-called regulators to do. So next. So what can the local governments do? So the local governments can do a lot, but for them to perform those roles, it is very important. Again, going from Eleanor Ostrom's mandate, we need to specify, we need to invest, and we need to clarify the roles in a framework, which is a statutory and a legal framework. And therefore, there is a need to make structural changes in local government's charter of roles and responsibilities. They need a clear legal framework of ownership and control of water bodies. They should say, "Idu nim kere new ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ." But ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಸಾಕಾಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. You need to give them power over those water bodies which lie within their jurisdiction, and we need to provide outlays. And outlays not just for maintenance, for routine maintenance, we do have outlays, but even for development. So there, when we don't give money for development, only give it for maintenance, and give the money for development to some other agency, that also creates a dichotomy. I will come to that next. So how do we institutionalize local governments' involvement in water governance is the question that I have been wondering, thinking about it. First of all, we need to, the ownership and control of water bodies should be firmly vested in local governments, saying that, okay, right now the tanks which are below 40 hectares of Achkat in Karnataka belong to ZP. But there again, ZP is a very far away body for a Gram Panchayat. So the Gram Panchayat says that it's a ZP tank. So whenever a grant comes for improvement of a road, it is the Panchayat Raj Engineering Department, under the guidance of some ZP member, will come and desilt or repair the tank without any involvement or consultation with the local bodies, the local governments. But we don't have adequate money also these days. That is an issue. But fortunately, Narega is a very viable source of funds for upkeep of tanks. Therefore, there is a need, first of all, to vest the ownership and control with the local governments. Secondly, orient the Gram Panchayats and train them to deal water resources as a comprehensive manner as a subject. They can do water budget. They can look at what is the water demand of the village, what is the supply, where is it coming, how many water bodies are there. And for development of these bodies, it is your role, your responsibility. And for that, these are the resources available with you. There is Narega available. There is a 15th Finance Commission. You have your own sources of revenue. You can raise money. But this kind of a clarity and clarification of role is necessary before the Gram Panchayats actually start taking interest in the development of the tanks. So in Karnataka, last year, June, July, we have framed the rules for setting up of tank conservation, development, and maintenance committees. These are statutory committees which are treated as a subcommittee under the Karnataka Panchayat Raj Act of the Panchayat. And now there is a need for us to market and canvass these rules among the Gram Panchayats, so that there is a sustained interest in it. And this should be done through a sustained training and engagement program, which is something that we are planning now. Next. So, in addition to the lack of clarity of roles and rights and responsibilities over the water bodies and the water resources as a subject, there is a misalignment of, there is a mistake there, typing mistake. There is a misalignment of incentives, and that needs addressing. So, what are the incentives? Like I already mentioned, that the grant is going to somebody else, the tank responsibility is with somebody else. So, therefore, there is a need to devolve regular grants for tank developments on the GP and incentivize thinking of water as a holistic resource at the Gram Panchayat level, and so that they can manage it in a comprehensive and integrated manner. And also show them these are the resources, these are your incentives, this is how you need to do it. Next. So this is, I have come more or less close to my presentation, and then I was wondering as to, what does the experience with the rural sector have for Bengaluru? I think the BBMP, there are experts, of course, but I think the BBMP should have a total control over ownership and management of the tanks and lakes and reservoirs in Bengaluru. Right now, there is a tank development authority. Then there are multiple agencies. Some tanks are with PDA. The minor irrigation department wants to take over. I strongly believe that BBMP should have control over these tanks, and then the BBMP should further delegate this to a lower level decision, elected bodies, representative bodies, which are statutory in making, not through a MOU with a corporate body, etc., but to a statutory body like a ward committee, for example. During COVID, I had started activating ward committees in BBMP so that they can take responsibility over COVID control over management. So if a tank falls within a ward, then it is better to entrust the responsibility of the tank on the ward committee, enter and give the resources also. And they should also look at the entire watershed that is feeding a particular tank, and then prepare plans for upstream development, upstream clearing of the water pathways, etc. And they should also engage with all the people who are there, not only on the downstream, but also in the upstream. So these are the issues I thought we should place before you. Our experience is that we have been spending a lot of money on revival of water bodies in villages. There is a lot of enthusiasm. But I would like to now focus my attention on putting these efforts within the framework of within an institutional framework, a framework of rules, regulations, so that, after I leave this department, this matter continues to be taken care of by the local bodies. Otherwise, what happens is that, okay, there is an officer who is interested, we are pushing here where work is getting done. But the nature of the local bodies is that unless it is properly given to them, they generally don't try to get into this field. They say, okay, tanks belong to minor irrigation department, they belong to ZP, adik naming sambandha villa. The same thing happens in cities also. In cities, the ward committee will say that it is not my responsibility. Our ward committees will complain that this has never been given to us. The BBMP will say that this is with BDA or with the tank development pradhikara that has been recently set up, etc. Or this will be entirely left to the officers, and at the officer level, they sometimes do take decisions like, entrusting it to a corporate sector through a MOU, without any involvement of the local bodies, sometimes not even with the BBMP. So therefore, my clear prescription, I have already spoken for 13 minutes. In 1 minute, I'll conclude. My clear prescription is, through a statutory or legal mechanism, please entrust the ownership and control of water bodies to a decentralized governance institution at an appropriate level. If a tank is beyond the jurisdiction of one panchayat, then a group of panchayats can take care of them, or maybe the taluk panchayat can take care of them. If it is beyond the jurisdiction of one ward committee, maybe 2-3 ward committees can come together. We need to think about that, but it is important to do a clear-cut role clarity, and that role clarity should be clothed in a legislative framework or a legal framework. And once that framework is there, then also it is not sufficient. My experience is, for example, I have formulated these rules and then we have circulated these rules among the ZPs and panchayats in the month of June. I need to take stock of it now, but I don't think much has happened, because we are busy with so many things. Now, if I start asking, then the CEO will say, no, sir, we have not yet canvassed these things. We need to canvass. I have prepared a frequently asked questions. And now we will train train all the Gram Panchayats and entrust this responsibility. I have told the Narega Commissioner, let us pass orders saying that the tanks, I will further delegate this tanks from the ZP to the Gram Panchayat, and the Gram Panchayat has Narega and 15th Finance Commission resources, and clearly tell them and show them that these resources are available. This tank is your responsibility and you need to take care of that. And it's not just tanks. Now in Shimoga and Tumkur district, we are trying pilots and the pilots are large. Both the districts, all the panchayats have taken. We are training the Gram Panchayats to prepare a water budget. Once a water budget is prepared, I am telling them that take a look at all the water bodies within the jurisdiction of your panchayat. You will be surprised that you will find that you have 5 carriers, 7 go-kartes, 8 kalyanis. Then you start improving each one of them. So this is the kind of framework that I have in mind. This is what we are going to do in rural sector. I do hope that my interventions have some lessons for Bengaluru. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leo and others, for inviting me for this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving an overview of the role of local governments in water governance. The ownership and control of water bodies should be firmly vested in local governments, and Environment Support Group has been very vocal about such decentralized management of water resources. Sir, I request you to be with us till the very end of the session so that you can take a few questions that might come across towards the end of this.
Sure.
Our next speaker is Mr. A.R. Shivakumar, a scientist who retired from the Karnataka State Council of Science and Technology at Indian Institute of Science. Mr. Shivakumar is a vociferous proponent of rainwater harvesting. His family has been living in Bangalore city and comfortably relying entirely on rainwater collected on the rooftop for over 2 decades. Over the years, Mr. Shivakumar has designed and implemented hundreds of rainwater harvesting projects in Bangalore, including at Vidhana Sauda and the Karnataka High Court. He has been honored with several awards, such as Central Government's National Innovation Award, Karnataka Government's Amulya Award, etc. He has played a key role in getting the Karnataka government to pass an amendment to the BWSSB Act that made rainwater harvesting compulsory for houses and offices with an area greater than 2,400 square feet. Mr. Shivakumar has been a dear friend and partner with Environment Support Group from its inception. Welcome, sir. I request you to address our participants now.
Thank you all. Thank you, Leo, and all the colleagues at ESG. Yeah, water is one of the most favorite subject, and especially in Bangalore. I'll just share my screen. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, in fact, Bangalore water, in fact, we have plenty of water. In fact, yeah, both of you have told in the introduction as well as Mr. Atheeq. We have plenty of water. Unfortunately, we have not been able to manage it properly. See the situation of Bangalore. In fact, Bangalore is blessed with such good natural resources. We have around 40 inches of annual rainfall, 1,000 millimeters of annual rainfall. And the weather mantle with the undulating landscape is tailor-made for rainwater harvesting, water conservation, and in fact, a city of lakes. Such a good distinction we had. Of course, now also we have whatever is left. Let us not complain what has happened. What is the situation today and what we can do? Let us see. Positively, there are so many things good can happen. And no, I don't agree that there is a doomsday here in Bangalore. Bangalore has such good people, natural resources, and the landscape, and everything is supportive. Let us bring it to something which is good. We receive something like 1,400 million liters of water per day, and 99 or 100% today is coming from Kaveri River. What is the fate here? 41% is unaccounted or non-revenue. Nobody knows where it goes. And we are playing with such kind of very high numbers which need to be looked into. And when we see such kind of thing, where does this used water go? Bangalore receives 1,400 million liters, and maybe at least half of that is coming from various other sources like groundwater, rainwater, used water, many other sources, tankers, and all play a big game. Without that, I don't think only this Kaveri water will take Bangalore to some logical end. All these things combined together. In fact, in future, you need to look for at least multiple sources of water. And only river water or the dam water cannot fill. Here, if you see this huge quantity of water which is coming to Bangalore, where does it go? You see, water cannot vanish. Whether you can use it in domestic or industry or very other, there are various sectors you can see here. The public taps and other things which have been given, the defense, railways, industries, non-domestic and all that. Where does the water go? Water cannot vanish. It has to come out. As per the norm, 80% of the water has to come out, and then that is used water. I don't call it as wastewater. There is nothing like wastewater. What is wastewater? Whatever the water we are using is somebody else has already used it, or it has come back to us. So this is the water what we have, and huge quantity. 80% of 1,400 million liters is a lot. And added to that, all other water which we add the rainwater, the groundwater which we are losing is a huge quantity of that water. See here, future, any city, whether it's Bangalore, whether it's India or outside, they cannot depend on only one source like a river or a dam. We need to have multiple sources. That is how we find a balance. In my view, this is something which I can suggest to Bangalore in the typical situation without much of hardship and which practically implementable. Kaveri, we have touched the brink, 1,400 million liters per day. Let us see that this is only 50% of our Bangalore requirement if we project a longer requirement. Rooftop rainwater can definitely meet 20% of it, which is much purer than Kaveri water, I can give to him. And Leo is a classic example. He is the richest person in Bangalore because he has 60,000 liters of rainwater right under his floor. And yeah, we have been living in my family for the last 26 years and rainwater. And we don't believe any other water other than rainwater, which is the purest form. And then we have been using. And groundwater, yes. Bangalore has good groundwater, unfortunately, which has not been managed properly. A lot of groundwater extraction has taken place. In fact, unlimited, uncontrolled. If we start managing all this, at least by metering, accountability is very important. We don't have any account. Nobody knows how many borewells are there. No department, no NGO, no authority, no individual knows how many borewells are in Bangalore. How many of them are functioning? How many are defunct? Nobody knows. Let us have account for all this. Reused water. Nearly around 2,000 million liters of water is used today in Bangalore, Kaveri and others. What happened to the used water of that? Where is the account? Why the importance of what we give, whether it's a funds allocation or the technology or the kind of awareness what we are building to fresh water or the domestic and industrial water what we supply? Not even 10 to 20% of that importance is given to the used water. Huge resource that is waiting on the wings to tap. That kind of such huge. Why do you think that only our neighbors around Bangalore should take all the filth? Whether it's solid waste, whether it is used water, it's all go to the periphery and those people have to take the brunt of it. Lots of water. Go to Kengeri, go to outside the Bangalore. My God, you can see that Bairamangala lake and surroundings there. There is nothing less than hell which you go there. And we are living here, we have the luxury of all this, and then we see that all these things somebody else has to manage. Let us use that as resource. There is enough technologies available. There are 12 points. Quickly, I will brief. And this is, I have been telling from last nearly around 15 years. If we implement this, some solution can be sustainably achieved, doable things, and equitable distribution of this natural resource, whether it is Kaveri River, rainwater, groundwater, used water, can be managed within that framework. Let us try to build an ecosystem which can manage. Rooftop rainwater harvesting is my favorite and is the easiest thing to do. There is nothing rocket science in it. The water which comes out from your the downwater pipe, which is going west, just attach a filter and divert to your sump. That's all is required. Anybody can do that. Whether it's old building or new building, this has to be made compulsory and it has to be implemented. We should have most of the people. Let us not go very sensitive or the sentiments of people will not touch. Some people are not interested in using rainwater for drinking. Let's say Kaveri water is also given to them. We have a small sum for Kaveri water, larger sum for rainwater, used for other purpose, fine. So we can have such kind of dual systems also. Then all properties under BBMP should have at least a rainwater sum separately and Kaveri water so that the accountability. You have meters for all this. You have anyway, the Bangalore is, we should appreciate BBMP, BWSSP to have such a good accounting system to have meters in most of the sectors. Almost every connection has the meters and then the accountability comes in. Can we have the meter for the borewells too? Whoever is pumping, whether it's a tanker supply or an individual, for accounting purpose. Let us have account to see that how much water we use, where it comes. That is how when we have the balance sheet ready with us, Then encouragement to have open wells. We have shallow aquifers, deeper aquifers. Let us try to see that this gets recharged and then people start using. Now the shallow aquifers are totally dry because we are not being able to manage properly. Bore wells as well as the groundwater, we need to manage, and then there are enough examples for it. Enforcement, strict sewage or effluent treatment, which is not happening. Though there are many agencies, whether it's Pollution Control Board, BBMP, BWS, many agencies, I think their hands are full, or they are not being able to manage properly, or some pressure, or I don't know, there are words to use. But there is, why should the Kengeri or you go to this Bairamangla or any other place, or even the Belandur Lake, why there should be such kind of dirty water flowing in this? There should be streams, there should be rivers which are flowing. If you have proper treatment plants and the tertiary treated water, there'll be enough people to buy that. There's a huge quantity of water to be. And groundwater recharge through intermittent recharge trenches in stormwater drains. It's a norm. In the town planning department, I suggested this. Any new layout should have, even in the drains, to see that the rainwater is percolated. Public parks and open places to have rainwater harvesting. We have 700 parks where the rainwater harvesting is being done. We have given the design. I have given the design for population, the wells, which is happening. Now let us see that the lawn culture is removed. Let's have the local trees and plants so that the water consumption comes down, the demand for chemical fertilizers and pesticides comes down, and the groundwater is rich because of this, and we sustain with that. Tree-based parks permit groundwater withdrawal proportional to how much they recharge. Now it's not. If you have a meter to the borewell, and if you know how much is the area what they have for roof water collection of the surface catchment area, then we can monitor very easily. You have no right to touch others' water, though it is underneath us. There's a huge lake underneath us. It is free. Unfortunately, you don't have the right to use. Let all others also participate in it. BWSSP established dual plumbing system for all layouts. Old layouts may be difficult, but at least new layout make an effort. Every house should have two water connections. One is either Kaveri or whatever the fresh water. Second one, used water should be given if they are not being able to manage within their premises. If apartments and other things can treat and use for at least for flushing and gardening, why not each individuals also? Why are you sparing? Let us have each individual supplied with some treated water. Enhanced tertiary treatment. Now you see Bangalore doesn't have even 50% of their used water to treat. Lot of water, untreated water goes out of Bangalore. It's one of the best wealth, and we have the asset of that waiting, and we can use that. Meet all category of user, whoever it is. Whether it is from the borewell, whether it is a tanker fellow, whether it's a Kaveri water, whether it is a bottle supplier, whoever it is, including rainwater, let us meter, let us see. Each one becomes an accountable, then only we will have. Even commercial establishments and those need to be. Bulk users like defense, railways, industries, and they can generate their own. They have, in fact, defense in Bangalore, there's nearly around 1/4 of Bangalore is defense land, and many other such kind of large areas. Can we ask them to generate their own water, whether it's rainwater or used water or something like that? If you do that, the burden on BWSSP comes down. The precious Kaveri water can be given to the people, peripheral areas where they are starved out. In fact, don't see how difficult for them to even get 1 day's requirement of drinking water in the peripheral area of Bangalore. Many apartments are lying vacant because of want of water, not because of many others. All lakes and water bodies, yes, Atheeq sir told very clearly, they have to be in control of one agency, and they need to be managed in such a fashion. They are assets of Bangalore. Not only for the aesthetic appeal, they should become the resources to use them for productive purpose, like either the groundwater recharge or directly pumping from them, and then start reusing that water. Thousands of rainwater tanks spread across Bangalore. If each and every property, whether it's a house, institution, or anyone, Bangalore at every property and hundreds of regenerated lakes in Bangalore will together act as buffer zones to hold precious water and also to avoid flooding of stormwater drains. It's been a norm now. Almost every rainy season we see there's so much of flood happening. Even the roads, the Mysore road has washed off because of so much. And low-lying areas have hit hard, and the civic agencies have not been able to come. If some small measures like this are judiciously implemented, people are supportive. Only thing is they should tell that they are doable things, they are success stories. If we do this, I think day is not too far that we have good control on water. And Bangalore need not see the doomsday. I don't think it will come. We all can support and see that these natural resources are used judiciously and distributed equitably among us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for giving a plan of action, a roadmap for creating the sustainable water supply for the city. The issue of accountability when engaging with life-sustaining resources like water becomes all the more crucial in the event of climate change, as we see. Thank you so much, sir, for that
Pleasure.
intervention.
My pleasure.
Next speaker is Ms. Jayna Kothari, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Ms. Kothari is an alumnus of Oxford University and a senior advocate practicing in the Karnataka High Court and the Supreme Court of India. She is also the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Law and Policy Research. Her research and practice interests include constitutional law, gender and sexuality law, disability rights, and discrimination law. Presently, a key public interest litigation Ms. Kothari argues for in the Karnataka High Court is Citizen Action Group's PIL to rehabilitate Rajakalu Bays and lakes of Bangalore. ESG has been working very closely with Ms. Kothari and her team in this case. Welcome, ma'am, and I request you to kindly address the session now.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone at ESG for inviting me and making me part of this conversation today. So I would like to kind of just give an overview of some of the litigation that has been going on in the Karnataka High Court on lakes and stormwater drains. And I'd like to kind of start off with one or two points that I think Mr. Atheeq also spoke in his presentation, and he ended with the issue of ownership of water bodies at the local level. Now we are far from that. And what we are trying to do is at least, if not ownership of water bodies at local level, at least have maintenance and upkeep of water bodies at the local level. And that has been these have been some of the issues that have come up in this litigation. Let me just give some of you and just a brief background of this case. And maybe there could be some conversations or questions, and other people may also be involved in it in some other ways. So this started off a few years ago by the Citizens Action Group. It started off initially as a petition to address encroachment of stormwater drains, and also one was of course encroachment of stormwater drains, and the second was to ensure that the stormwater drains that feed into lakes are, not carrying sewage. So therefore, the lakes are not dumped with sewage. So these were some of the issues that we prayed for in this PIL, and this petition was filed, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. We had initially a lot of orders, interim orders, where the court directed that all the stormwater drains in Bangalore city should be, there should be a report done that encroachments should be removed. All sewage lines which are illegally connecting to stormwater drains should be disconnected. The stormwater drains that flow into the lakes should only have rainwater or stormwater and not sewage, and to report back. Now, BBMP and giving their reports, and of course, there was a lot to be said, and all of that. Was happening to some extent, not perfectly. And then the last couple of years, or maybe the last 1.5 years, there's been a huge change in the direction of this PIL, and that has really been because the High Court has taken quite a proactive view on lakes, and And when this kind of turn happened, I think ESG also, Leo joined in, and ESG has also implemented itself and become a party here. So this started off really with the High Court asking the government and the BBMP to give a status on the lakes in Bangalore. And the government said that there were about 200 lakes, 200 odd lakes. And out of these 200 odd lakes, it was reported, I mean, the BBMP actually reported that about 20 lakes were had disappeared. By disappeared, we mean that they basically encroached and built upon, and a lot of this encroachment on these 20 lakes, or these 20 disappeared, 19 disappeared lakes, was actually done by the government and government agencies. So you have bus stands there, you have government buildings there, government office there. So a lot of times the encroachment is by government or government agencies. And so the other lakes, there were lakes with a lot more destruction. There were islands being built in the lakes. There was encroachment, large scale encroachment on lakes. And so in order to address many of these things, the High Court initially passed a whole series of directions in 2018. In 2018, a large set of directions to which ranged from, one of the biggest orders it passed was that NEERI, which is a central government kind of agency, NEERI was appointed to make a detailed inspection and survey of all the lakes in Bangalore and to give a report on its recommendations for the rejuvenation and revival or development or improvement of the lakes. And right from appointment of NEERI to ensuring that the government and the different government agencies do a survey of the lakes, to report on the encroachments, do a survey of stormwater drains and make a report on their encroachments and ensure that the encroachments are removed, to have a grievance redressal mechanism. And one of the directions was also to revive the directions that were passed in an earlier PIL relating to lakes in Karnataka, which was a petition that ESG had worked or I think initiated. And in that petition, the High Court had again passed a whole series of directions for lakes specifically. And there was a committee set up under Justice N.K. Patil. He was a judge of the Karnataka High Court. It was known as the N.K. Patil Committee. And the committee had given a whole series of recommendations. And based on those recommendations, the High Court had passed a series of orders in that previous petition. And so those orders were also reiterated by the High Court presently in this ongoing petition. Now, one of the issues in this regard is something that relates back to what Mr. Atheeq said. And that was in the previous case, the N.K. Patil committee had recommended that there should be different levels of monitoring bodies to monitor lakes and tanks and water bodies to ensure that their encroachment or removal of encroachment, rejuvenation and development takes place. And there were different levels. So one was at the top was the Apex Committee. An Apex Committee was at the state level. And then there was a municipal committee and a district committee. And this was to address, and each of these committees had representatives from different, government agencies. And this was to address encroachment of lakes or water bodies at the local level. Now, we realized in this petition that, these bodies were not at all functioning. And then the court has with the court directions, the court has revived the functioning of these bodies. And so when this was brought up, we realized that there was a gap. And this gap was that while there was a apex body and a district level body and a municipal body, at least for BBMP, there wasn't a body at a lower level, which is not at the district level, but at a much lower level, maybe at a village or taluka level. Because even if you take at a district level body, for the entire district, there may be hundreds and hundreds of lakes and water bodies, and it may not be feasible to manage and to look after that water body. And so, one of the issues that has been proposed, especially by ESG, has been to have a village level or panchayat level or at least a taluka level body or a committee to which can ensure that the maintenance of the water bodies and tanks and lakes within its jurisdiction can be done at that level. And then if it is not done, it can then be escalated to the district or state level. This is a situation where the High Court has to still kind of pass orders on this. But yes, this is if I think if we do get orders, then I think that will be extremely useful. It will enable protection of water bodies at the lowest level, and that is basically the crux of decentralization. Ensure that at the gram panchayat level or at the village level there is some, if not ownership of water bodies, but at least maintenance and monitoring of encroachment and destruction of water bodies. So this is currently there at the what is happening. But I think so that this is one issue. But there have also NIRI has submitted its report. It submitted an initial report, and the High Court under Chief Justice Oak has been the Chief Justice has been very, very interested in ensuring that the recommendations of NIRI are kind of carried out. So at least in the context of a few big lakes in Bangalore, maybe 4 or 5 big lakes where there were encroachments, there were islands being built, there were other forms of encroachments, the High Court has stepped in and taken a stand and passed directions against such encroachment, and also passed directions for the revival or rejuvenation of those particular lakes. So it's quite promising. We can see that where judges are interested and take up this issue in a very strong manner, you can see changes happen on the ground. So I think so it's a very positive sign, and so that has been happening, and we hope that this litigation kind of continues and spreads to not only rejuvenation of lakes and water bodies in Bangalore, but also in other parts of Karnataka. And hopefully with setting up of bodies, monitoring bodies at a sub-district level or a taluka level, it will make such monitoring easy. So I think I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Jayna, for highlighting the role of judiciary in management of water commons. The need of rehabilitating this network of Raja Kaluves and reclaiming urban bodies are really crucial to mitigate the impacts of climate change. I have the pleasure of now inviting architect Neelam Manjunath, founder, Center for Green Building Materials and Technology. Architect Neelam Manjunath is an architect, planner, scientist, activist, and theoretician. She is also the Bamboo Ambassador of India. She has 30 years of experience in the field of sustainable architecture and technologies. Her architecture is distinguished for the use of low energy materials and technologies with special emphasis on the use of bamboo. A champion of resource equity on this planet, she founded Center for Green Building Materials and Technology with the aim of building awareness and providing eco-education to promote sustainable living, which is a prerequisite for mitigation of global warming. She has won several national and international awards for her work. And ma'am, now I request you to kindly address the audience.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Good evening to everybody, and I really heartily thank Advocate Saldana and all the ESG group for inviting me to be on this forum. It's an honor and a privilege to be part of a group which is trying to do something about the future of Bangalore. I'm really honored. And the topic actually for me to touch upon that was given was about the use of building materials. That is a very extractive use that we are having, model that we are having right now. And how do we actually shift to, with involving the built environment with water and energy security. So I will just start my presentation, a very brief presentation through which, sorry, yeah. I have a little problem in doing full screen, so I will just work this way. I hope that's fine. Yeah. Okay. So this, I know we all have been talking since in the beginning of this thing about water security, and I will just tell you briefly, take you how the buildings are involved in this, and in a very big manner, and what we are actually supposed to be doing. At the same time, on the right side, what small, this is not my photograph, but nature is the key, is what is the message that is supposed to be, that is supposed to come from this particular photograph. And what I have been trying to do through Center for Green Building Materials and Technology, we have started a CGBMT School of Simple Living since last year, when added thing to that, because everybody, this sustainable word seems to be really quite abused this manner. Everybody does everything, and they call it sustainable, including materials on what. I thought simplicity was a better word, and so we actually try to do most of our, now we are trying to focus on that, because if everyone can live simply, probably we will be able to have more equitable world. I think these are very common photographs, so I will not go into that. I will directly go to urbanization, which is a topic which I think the whole world, they think of the Manhattan skyline or the Singapore skyline. That is the thing about development. So if you have a country which is developed, or a state which is developed, so that means it is using more resources, and that's what is the country or state or a city is called a developed state or a developed country. That is the idea. But there's another thing which is something we have to understand, that an urban area, which is like a built up area, is a human settlement. It was with a high population density. That's the difference between a rural area and a city which is there, and infrastructure which is built environment. These are created by urbanization and categorized by urban morphology, which are called cities or towns or conurbations or suburbs. However, with this thing, to support this high density settlement, you also have to have capital development, which is the capitalism kind of a thing, which has to develop to support this city which is generated there. And this, as you can see here, the kind of and this has been, Bangalore is touching almost, as Shesta was speaking, a population of approximately 2 crores. The population division and of the United Nations Economic and Social Welfare Program, that this time has predicted that it will grow by 6.4 billion, and most of them will be in China, India, and Nigeria. With that kind of a thing, where do we actually stand? Now, the housing deficit, because the cities are unplanned, and we suddenly develop these industries, and then we have this surge of people from the outskirts and from the rural areas who come into the city, and the city is not actually made for, it is not ready for that kind of a surge of population from from the surrounding areas. So we have generally this kind of a situation, which is, one is that you have pigeonhole kind of apartments, where again it's a very it's not a livable condition. And the second one is the slum, which actually services these kind of apartments and other kind of conglomerations in the city. And you are on a perpetual housing deficit because of this migration which keeps on happening, and urbanization which keeps on happening, and keeps on growing with every year. And if you see this particular graph here, the CO2 emissions by the construction industry is by far the largest emitter of actually CO2 fuel emission that happens is from the construction industry. It can go as high as 50 to 60% in some of the countries like UAE. Per person, if you really try to see the kind of resource in water and other consumptions, this is the kind of situation that is. And what is being done, which is come on the right side, if you see here, through green buildings, they generally call it, it is just about 5.7%. So, there's a lot of parity between what we actually and use of resources, and what we do to mitigate that is absolutely unbalanced. So because of that, we have a lot of problems as we see. And then the water extraction and the building industry, if you see here, the report released by the Down to Earth actually extracts 145 cubic kilometers of water every day. And the building construction industry is one sector which consumes a substantially high amount of water every year. And it is like, it's generally sourced from groundwater, leading to a further water scarcity. Just about 1 square meter, which is approximately 100 square feet of wall construction, can on an average takes 350 liters of water. And the quality of water for construction works are same as drinking water. So it's a very high quality fresh water which is required for construction. I mean that is the kind of thing which is very much required. Otherwise, it may adversely affect the properties of the concrete, especially the setting, hardening, and other things. So this is the kind of scenario that we have here from the construction industry. Now, the need for water in construction comes from various sources. If you see here, the water supply is like, for all these kind of different kind of things: drinking water, on-site facilities, concrete batching, water grouting. All these things are there in that. So there's a lot of different kinds of activities in which water is used, and this water, as I said, it is a very it's a pure water. Now, if we come to now Bangalore, the scenario of Bangalore making water, Bangalore water energy secure. So thanks to all the kind of development that we have, Bangalore being called the very developed city of India and across the world. Thanks, we have the great Silicon Valley, the IT sector, with millions and millions of concrete and glass buildings built with high energy guzzling materials and construction methods, and further needing enormous amount of energy for running the buildings also. So how do we make the city water energy secure while providing the basic needs of housing, food, water, electricity, etc. to all the people? Here are some of the photographs. We know how the tankers, these are very common sight in our this thing. How much water actually we need? I'm right now going to the domestic level. As per our national building code, we provide 135 liters of water per person per day. As per that, we build the water demand, supply, and things like that for everyone. Now, out of this, if you see, only 5 to 6 liters or maximum maybe 10 liters is supposed to be potable water quality. The rest of the water is used for washing, bathing, and things, etc. If you see on the right side, the energy demand, the luxury water demand, and there are 3 categories here. The rigid water demand, which we cannot do anything about, it's a basic need. And then we have water demand to meet and improve life, that can be a reasonable water demand that we can, which is a flexible thing, which can be moved. And there's another one, which is the luxury water demand, as something like swimming pools in every house and so many other kind of thing, and car washing with Kaveri water and all these kind of things that we have. That comes in the upper kind of a thing. And so if in the domestic water if you see, there are lots of ways in which it actually can be done. So this particular actually graph actually shows that there is a possibility that it can be actually done. And this actually I've taken directly from your this thing, that how the water comes, and I think it's already been spoken. So I advocate, and I have been advocating now buildings for simple living, or let's say basic living. If we are able to design spaces and buildings to fulfill the basic need of a shelter to perform various activities. Now, how do we actually go about it? What should we do? We use materials with low energy, and low energy, I will come to that just in my next slide. Water management on site during construction. Now, using material with low energy and water management on site is a very important thing, because that happens in a very short amount of time when the construction is actually happening, and that you cannot change in the during the life cycle of the whole building. So this is then you have the rainwater harvesting, which I think Shivakumar has very aptly he has actually already spoken about, in treatment of water. So rainwater harvesting, treatment of water, in that include the water management side. You also have low flow fixtures in toilets and kitchens, which can actually greatly reduce the consumption of water. Landscaping with low to water requirements, no water hungry lawns, no foreign and Singapore kinds of landscaping. Let's have very simple natural landscaping, which actually requires very less. The hardy plants of indigenous varieties, which actually can be used in landscaping and give us much better biodiversity, flora and fauna at the place. Another very important thing is about natural light and ventilation. This is directly related to energy requirements for a building and energy security in that way. And how do you actually for this also I have another slide. I will really explain that in that what I really mean about natural light and ventilation and how we can actually use for that. And then of course decentralize the supply of water and electricity, which I think Atheeq sir and even Shivakumar also spoke about it, that decentralized. I completely am for that actually. I mean, that's something which is very, very important. Now, this is something called the embodied energy. When I told about low energy material, so you have certain amount of emission that is done by building materials while they are being made into a material with which we can construct, and which has a lot of carbon emissions, as you can see. Which so it is using resources. So that resources can be in terms of energy and water as well, both. So as you can see, there are different kinds. So we have to actually look at these when we are actually doing our buildings. We all know that the construction, and I'll show you the next slide, which is a much simpler slide, which says energy balance. It is required to produce a unit of building material with certain level of load bearing capacity. You can see for steel it is 1500, and for wood and bamboo it is 80, and for cement it is 100. So it's a very less amount of energy is required to use these building materials into construction. And I know I have been really I'm quite lot of I'm laughed at telling that the moment I speak about this, they would say, okay, let's start doing mud houses and bamboo houses in the whole of the city. And why not? Of course, why not? But I'm not talking about the shacks that we are talking. There are very different kind of buildings that can be done, and there are different ways to do it. And so this is something which is very, very important, because as I said, this is spent, this energy is spent, this water is spent at one time in the life of a building, which you cannot change by any other means. So this we have to be really careful about what kind of materials we use for construction. Recycled wood, and there are many other, and of course the waste. We have a lot of waste. We are very good at generating waste as a material. We produce waste as a material every day, and we can definitely use it in a very, very different many different ways. And there are two examples I would like to just give here. If each person in Bangalore reduces 25 watts, let's say that's one bulb consumption per day, you know, you have 25 watts into 40 lakhs household. I'm just assuming 2 crores population and 5 people per household, 40 lakhs. We have 1 lakh kilowatt, per day saved in Bangalore per day. Similarly, when we are talking about water, if we have each person saves 10 liters of water, that is 50 liters approximately per household, or uses that much less, 10 into 2 crores of the population, if we see 20 crores liters water saved per day. And this actually can be distributed to the other people, who can actually use it, who have no water actually. And this is a very simple achievable goal by collaboration of architects. And why I'm telling collaboration of architects, because if you give good natural lighting, you don't need lights during the day, you don't need air conditioner throughout the year. If you do that, you can actually make buildings which are much better in ventilation, natural lighting through that. And the common man The common man also should not be thinking about, like, we want to have, and I will tell you, I have been again, laughed at by very IT professionals when I say, okay, let's have 3 kilowatt only from the department, and then the rest you can produce on your rooftop if you really want to do that, because everyone should have some electricity for themselves. And then why should we need 12 kilowatt? IT people need 12 kilowatt. That is the kind of statement that you have. And I think our BESCOM people also, the standards have been raised. The standards of how much electricity you can consume in Bangalore has been raised by from 3 kilowatt to maybe 10 to 12 kilowatt. I do not know why that was done. And I think that also needs to be addressed. And this is something which is, I'm giving a very, very simple example, which is absolutely doable. I mean, you really don't need to do a lot of, kind of, kind of calculations on programs. If we are able to, mobilize people. And for this, I think the best example was given by Atheeq sir and also by Shivakumar, that we should have ward level things. I just wanted to tell this, that we should supply only some balance should be actually people should supplement by rainwater harvesting compulsorily, and recycling, and local ponds for supply. So if you have some kind of if we have some committees in each ward, and we make a committee which takes care of all these kind of things, they should, the way they used to do in olden days and in the rural areas, where they used to take care of their own water supply and own ponds, which used to be there in the villages or in their area. The moment the tapped water supply came, we are not responsible for the water at all. People became irresponsible for water. But when they had a well, or when they had a water body in the village which they were supposed to use for their usage, they were more responsible. So if we try to have this 3-tier kind of a thing, you have some rationed amount of water which is from the government, and then you have rainwater harvesting water which you produce yourself, and you recycle. You also recycle, and local ponds for supply. So, in local ponds means local lakes and all for supply to a particular area. If we try to do this kind of a thing, and similarly for energy, if we try to tell, I think already it was spoken, also if we can do, I think we should be able to reach our goals much easier. And this, I think I had spoken about this in one of our architecture conferences on city planning, I think more than about 6-7 years ago or 10 years ago, that let's have in Bangalore, let's have committees in each ward, with you have an architect, you have a scientist, you have a this thing and all. There are different kind of people across this thing, and they collaborate to look after this like their own village and their like own commons. So something which I thought I would just like to share. And one more thing which is very important: de-urbanize big time. We have to de-urbanize, because there are lots of properties which are built only for profit motive. They are not to give the basic needs of the people, actually, rather than necessity. There's a real estate lobby which is actually with Hansing Glovewitz. I would not like to spell it out, because as I said, the more of the government think that the more construction, the more developed they look, and all those data look very nice actually that they are developed. So people try to build just for the sake of building, and that is really creating a lot of problem for everyone. And if another thing is, as I said, de-urbanize also means move out of Bangalore to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, to urban areas. And I think that will probably solve many of our issues. Thank you. With this, I would like to close my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for deconstructing the concept of sustainability. Thank you for drawing that link between population, migration, sector of construction that is currently so water extractive in nature. And I also thank you for bringing up the issue of de-urbanizing the metropolis and believing that it is absolutely doable. Thank you once again. Our penultimate speaker for the day is Mr. Sagar Nambiar. Mr. Sagar has a degree in environmental science from St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. He has been part of several research projects in the Western Ghats and is currently in the Andamans learning to become a dive master to participate in coral reef restoration. He has been using a grey water treatment system along with rainwater harvesting for the last 17 years at his residence in Bangalore. Mr. Sagar is in the field right now and was unable to join through Zoom due to poor internet in Annapolis. He has sent a pre-recorded video addressing the issue. In place of Mr. Sagar, we requested his father, Mr. Jaydeep Nambiar, to join us and expand a little more on the issues addressed by him. We will now play the video sent by Mr. Sagar and then listen to Mr. Jaydeep's view on the same. I now request my colleague.
I'm not an expert on groundwater or water harvesting systems. Therefore, I shall be speaking today more as an end user or practitioner of such systems, having used them for the last 17 years. Our house is built on a half-acre piece of land on the southern fringes of Bangalore, on the Kanakpura road. We did not have a Kaveri water connection, and we still do not have one. Therefore, the accent has been on grey water recycling and rainwater harvesting. Our source of groundwater, an ill-tempered borewell, would on a good day give us maybe 2,000 liters of water. So recycled grey water is what we would use mainly to water our land, which over 17 years has transformed from a patch of barren ground to something quite lush and green. Our grey water system is a combination of a baffle reactor, a planted gravel filter, and a polishing pond. It is simple and requires no maintenance whatsoever and has worked well all these years. The clarity of the treated water is good and the water has almost no odor apart from a faint earthy fragrance. We do have other water conserving measures such as the dry toilet, and our flush toilets use runoff from our washing machine. We have a rainwater harvesting capacity of 50,000 liters, and on the land we have dug borewell recharge, percolation wells, and created ditches and swales at strategic points, which have been quite successful at minimizing runoff during the rains. At this point, let me stop blowing my own trumpet and get back to the topic of this webinar. I would like to put forward a few questions that have been troubling me as a young person. We live sandwiched between a village that is adjacent to the BWSSB pipeline that carries Kaveri water to the city and an exclusive apartment complex. In between are a sprinkling of independent houses, farmhouses, and such. Every morning, the BWSSB releases water through a single tap outside their wall. The queues are long and every person is allowed to fill 2 biddies pots of 5 to 10 liters. And this will account for families' drinking and cooking needs for the day. Hardly a few meters away, in a bungalow, a man washes his car with what appears to be a near limitless supply of water. And just down the road in the apartment complex, lawns are kept clean and water-guzzling ornamental plants are allowed to thrive in the name of landscaping. Something is plainly wrong here. Is water seen by all of us as a fundamental right of every human being, like air? I ask this in the context of climate change, where an increasingly capricious monsoon, coupled with our reckless extraction, has played havoc with our groundwater. Bangalore now has maybe 200 lakes, where we once had 1,000. And as a wildlife person, it is sad to see the loss of these wetlands and the devastation to the flora and fauna that has accompanied it. For instance, a species of frog known as the common pond frog, Euphlyctus hexadactylus, has gone from, as the name suggests, one of the commonest freshwater species to something that is a rarity now. And the true extent of this loss is actually not known. We do not even have the data to understand by how much the numbers have reduced, and that is frightening, because how many more little known or even undocumented species are going away at a similar rate and completely without our knowledge. More than 45% of this city is dependent on groundwater, and groundwater in turn is dependent on the health and level of our lakes. For example, 1 to 1.5 kilometers from our house is the Kothari Kere that abuts the Rorick estate. Our immediate neighbor is the Valley School, which, despite having a thickly wooded expanse of 110 acres and following the best environmental practices, their borewell yields are still directly dependent on the level of the lake. Needless to say, everybody else downstream, myself included, is also dependent on the lake. These same lakes, we as a species are building over them, poisoning them, and choking and strangling their catchment areas, almost as if these actions have little or no consequence. I will end what I have to say by raising one final question. It is likely that we are too late to prevent the fallout from humanity's blatant irresponsibility, as E.O. Wilson has asked in the context of the massive human-caused extinction. He asked, have we no shame? And it would appear that indeed many of us do not have any shame. So I am asking, we are too late to prevent this fallout. We likely are too late to prevent this fallout, but are we too late to change our thinking? Thank you.
I thank Mr. Sagar for sending that video to us. Now I request Mr. Jaydeep to step in and expand a little bit on the issues raised by Mr. Sagar. Hello, sir. Sir, you have to unmute. Sir, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Actually, I was not really expecting to be called on to speak, because I was told by Bhargavi that maybe I'd have to take a few questions.
Just a brief stand on what you feel about the issues and the question raised by Mr. Sagar towards the end of the video.
Yes. You see, when he was a small boy and we used to drive around Bangalore, and I used to point out to him let's say the Kantidava Stadium or Banshankari bus stand, the Majestic, and tell him these used to be lakes. Seems to me that in the mind of a young person who is already seen this kind of devastation, and there is a sense of helplessness in the young, that they have been handed the city with 200 highly polluted lakes and another 800 which are largely historical, and a mess that is created by other people that they are being called upon to solve. Secondly, you see, we talk of rainwater harvesting and greywater recycling and so on, but as he has pointed out to me, it is largely the activity of the privileged who have a roof, who have ground, and so on. And the attitude appears to be of people, when they do such things, of the water being theirs alone. We all know, for instance, that the groundwater is dropping. And we all know that, say, it is possible for people with roofs and big sumps to store a lot of water. That's a fact. We also know that the Kaveri, for instance, is not fed by ice melt or something. It is not a perennial river, it's an ephemeral river which dries up at summertime. And we can't just go on depending on it forever, because the agrarian stress on the Kaveri is also tremendous. We can't monopolize that water indefinitely. So is there going to come a time, because already to harvest one's rainwater and recycle one's used water is not merely a fanciful activity of a rich man. It is a responsibility of a citizen, because a time may come when we might have to share. You cannot have so many people having so less water and people being so profligate in their usage of water just because they happen to have bigger houses and so on. And from our observation of water, the groundwater, it's nobody lives in isolation here. Water itself is dependent on a large number of mysterious inputs into the lakes that feed the groundwater, which are not really well understood. And if we continue with this building over catchments and pumping sewerage into the lake, we're basically destroying ourselves, and we might reach a time when we have to evacuate the city. It is becoming a possibility. I am not an expert of any kind. I'm just saying it as I see it. In that sense, I really enjoyed Mrs. Manjunath's presentation about how the simple things can go so far towards saving so much of water, and because we actually need a water surplus if everybody is going to get water. And I think that people who save water should also now start thinking of their role in the coming years of sharing that water that they save. And when you are talking of bare 55 liters a day of potable and drinking water being considered sufficient for a person, we should also be looking at our own usage of the same when we do that. Simply saving water or recycling water and feeling very self-righteous about it is not what we need to do. We need to be aware that as a city, we are commons in the genuine sense of the word. And that's what I hope and think the younger people of today will see, which we have sadly been unable to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I thank Mr. Sagar for highlighting the loss of flora and fauna due to reckless destruction and blatant responsibility, as Mr. Sagar said, of our urban wetlands. And I also thank Mr. Jayna for highlighting the inequality and inequity that exists when it comes to distribution, use, and management of resource like water. Now, our final speaker for the session is Ms. Rema Kumar. Ms. Rema is the current director of Bhoomi College. She is an educationist with over 2 decades of experience. She has been involved with Prakriya Green Wisdom School, Bengaluru, since its initial years. She held the roles of principal and director of the school before moving on to Bhoomi Network. She has a passion and commitment to institution building processes, enabling individuals to tap into their potential to build learning communities. She also has a keen interest in issues of deep ecology and the art of using stories to connect ideas and people. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. I invite you to speak now.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the ESG team for inviting me. So, as a last speaker, I think it's interesting and it's a challenging task. So, the whole macro theme of moving towards water security, I'll be sharing from our experiences of what institutions can do. So when we started out in '99, one of the things that we decided on was that we as an institution, particularly an education institution, need to address real life issues because that will enable in building consciousness. And these learning for about real life issues needs to be a lived experience and not just an intellectual or academic exercise. We also felt that sharing the principles underlying any of the practices that we follow is important to build consciousness amongst all members, whether it's the teaching community, the student community, the parent community, or the support staff community, so that these values are co-held and it becomes an inclusive process. So one of the principles that we wanted to practice was to practice water prudence. So before I go into the details of all the things that we've done, and I'm talking about our, from a very micro point of what we have done as an institution. So we are dependent on 2 bore wells. That's our source of water. So we felt that if that's what we are, depending on, and we are taking water out, there should be ways in which we put back the water so that we are not only extracting mindlessly. We needed to build that consciousness of being responsible and putting back at least a large portion of what we take out. So we did rainwater harvesting. We continue to do rainwater harvesting. We have about 7 rainwater harvesting tanks. We do it from both rooftops as well as from the ground. We have 2 large recharge pits, which are located at the lowest point in our land, and this enables us to collect all the surface or most of the surface runoff from rains. We also have about 10 recharge wells spread all over the campus. And what we've seen is, one is it enables us to not draw from the bore well most of the time during the monsoons when we have good rains. And also the other thing we have noticed is it seems to have impacted our bore wells also. Though we can't draw a direct connection, we are able to still tap water from about 150 to 200 feet here, whereas all around us, people need to go much deeper to get water from the borewell. So we feel that this has really helped us in recharging the water table in and around our area. The other thing we have done is to recycle black water. So our maximum water usage is, of course, in the kitchen and the canteen. We have a kitchen that feeds close to 500 people, children and adults included. We also have an organic garden where there is, of course, water usage. So one thing we have kept in mind, like I think Jayna she was talking about how to have water prudent landscaping. So we do not have any lawns. We have all the trees we have planted in the campus are all indigenous varieties, and we are very water prudent in the way we use water in our garden and in the land. So we thought recycling water. We have 2 phytorid plants. So these are some pictures of the phytorid plants we have. Enables us to recycle water both from the kitchen and the toilet. And we are able to recycle about 90% of the water that we use. So in a way, we are able to close the loop. Maximum usage is in the kitchen and the canteen, and the maximum demand is in our organic garden. So by recycling the water, we are able to close the loop. The water that is recycled from the washrooms, we direct it to the orchards. So we have 2 phytorid plants. Can you go back to the last slide, please? The next one. We have, another thing we have kept in mind is that we have chemical-free alternatives for cleaning. This then enables that recycling is far easier because at the source itself, the water is not contaminated with chemicals. To build consciousness in the group, to bring primacy to water prudence, we do water trails with the students, with the teachers, with the support staff, so that this whole principle is held sacrosanct by everyone, and it enables people to become responsible users. You can go to the next slide on the phytorid plant. So this is just some data that we have 2 phytorid plants. One recycles the black water from the kitchen and one the black water from the washrooms. Before we set this up in 2015, we had a more basic kind of recycling plant. This we found to be more efficient. It doesn't require any power at all. And it requires also very little maintenance because basically the plants do most of the work for us. All the wetland natural cleansers are used. For example, the Chinese umbrella plant or cannas or the water reeds, cattail, these plants are used for cleansing. And the investment also was not too much. In fact, we used the amount, some of the amount we got from the Wipro Earthian, prize money that we got, the children had participated in. We used some bit of it for this. So investment wise also, it wasn't too much. It is a tidy amount, but we felt it was important to put these practices in place. So this is just a link for a YouTube, which will, anybody is interested to know more about the phytorid plant can look at. So to end, what I'd like to say is that the whole issue is at a macro level. When you look at it, it is huge, and there are lots of stakeholders to need a lot of effort from many quarters. But from our experience as an institution, what we feel is that it's doable to enable people to become responsible users and consumers. And what we've seen is that when something becomes a lived experience, it becomes a way of life, it becomes a way of thinking, it becomes a practice. And when something is given so much primacy, it becomes also a conscious learning. So it's both conscious and unconscious learning that happens. And I'd like to end with what Keith said, that education should be about lighting a fire, rather than filling in pails. So practices like this just helps in triggering, in lighting that fire, which then helps people take it forward in their own. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for stressing on the need to build consciousness among various communities about ideas such as water prudence at institutional levels and how such practices can prove to mitigate the climate change. As we see, we have already passed our allocated time, but I would request our speakers and participants to stay a little longer so that we can take up few questions. So now we are open for a question and answer session. The first question is for Mr. Atheeq. Mr. Shrikant says, depending on borewells causes more problems. Can rejuvenation of rural drinking water wells on priority basis solve this dependence on borewells? Mr. Atheeq?
Rejuvenation of what? What is the question? Rejuvenation of?
Mr. Shrikant says, depending on bore wells causes more problems. Can rejuvenation of rural drinking water wells on priority basis solve the dependence on bore wells?
Well, rejuvenation of rural water wells where it is possible certainly should be done. So wherever open wells are still an option, we are digging a lot of open wells. Actually, we are digging hundreds of open wells as we speak. But everywhere you cannot rejuvenate open water wells. The connection between surface and groundwater is been snapped in Kolar, Chikbalapur, Bangalore rural, Bangalore urban. When you drill 1,500 feet deep, any amount of recharge except direct point injection recharge of those bore wells may not work. So in fact, there was one speaker, Mr. Shivakumar, who spoke about recharge technologies. I'm interested in talking to him later about how do we really go about recharging. Under NREGA, we are investing a lot in recharge of bore wells. How effective those recharge structures are, I am not so sure. We have to conduct an evaluation, but there are a lot of doubts, whether we can really recharge it effectively. What are we recharging depends a lot on the geology and geomorphology. A lot of factors are there whether recharging will work or not. But in principle, yes, we have to rejuvenate traditional water bodies wherever we can. But where we cannot, we have to find other solutions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Shivakumar. So one of our participants asked, in order to have resilience in the future water needs of Bengaluru, why not pump 2 types of water through the existing water supply pipes? And he says drinking water between 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and pumped treated water between 9 a.m. and 12 noon for domestic purposes like gardening and other stuff other than drinking. So if you could just give your views on that, Mr. Shivakumar?
Though the idea is good, practically it is not possible because we don't have a supply 24/7, and many a time the pipeline is empty. If you have two dual supply system of different qualities, there is a lot of stagnant water inside the pipe and various this one, and there will be a lot of mix-up. I don't think it's a feasible solution, but dual pipeline is a feasible solution. At least for the peripheral area and the new area which I have suggested, can be definitely done. And it's practically implemented in many cities and even outside. Several countries have this been practicing for several decades. It's been over.
Thank you, sir. The next question is for Neelam ma'am. One of our participants asked, where can one source materials for building with low energy? People tend to look for at least amount of repairs in their houses. How would these low energy houses compare with the typical concrete ones? Neelam ma'am?
Yeah, I think it's a very obvious question that people ask because we have a lot of commercials on the TV telling that the concrete buildings are more resilient and steel is very important. But if you see, concrete buildings last not more than between something like 40 to 70 years, let me tell you. And the mud and bamboo buildings or mud and wood buildings, the traditional buildings have been lasting for more than 200, 300 years. And that I think talks about the much more, much better. That is one thing. And where do you find is actually the system that I'm talking about is simple, is you get the mud, you get the soil from the foundation, you build your house with that soil, with the compressed earth blocks. You harvest the water on your site, you harvest the sun on your site to have energy, you harvest the air that comes on your site to have a proper ventilation. So harvest and the space that you have, you harvest these 5 elements, which is free given by nature on your site. With this, of course, you will need little more of the other materials. You will need little bit of cement. Maybe you can, instead of that, you can try to reduce the amount of cement and use lime and fly ash and other things. fly ash is a waste, which is also available. So this is another thing which actually can be used. And mud is available, as I said, and bamboo bazaar is almost in India especially. You have a bamboo bazaar in almost every town. You have multiple of them actually, many places. You also local wood which is available, though it is considered inferior. So what is happening is something which is more, there is a dearth. So what is the most kind of a wood that is there? Rosewood, which takes about 40 to 60 years to mature. Same thing with teak. But if you tell somebody that you use silver oak, they think it's a it's a it's not a good thing to use. But let me tell you, this silver oak also can be used. So we are supposed to look at these solutions, and this has to be that talk about simple living is about the simple man on the street. How does he or she take the step forward? Not the COP 21 or 25 or maybe 30 or whatever, which is going to solve the global warming problem. It is the common man on the street. Once he is enlightened, he and she is the only one who can save the world. And that is how. So instead of asking questions to other people and things like that, it is we have to ask from ourselves, how do we actually take the first step? So these are some things. Yes, of course, even architects also, they have to bend little backwards, because these things are not who will sell you bamboo so much. But you will have concrete and cement and steel, because they are corporations, they are making profits, they have a marketing budget, so they are able to sell, but we are not, the other people are not able to sell. And similar thing is for other kind of technologies, because if you try to tell that you not be good, because then the water supply companies and there are so many other people whose profit will be complete, so they would not like it. So we have to start, and this will take time, of course. But when is the time to start? Now is the time, and now is the time we have been telling from 1970. So I mean, this is quite a number of years have already passed. We have to do it now. We have no other thing. And if after a 1 year of living with COVID, the way we have been, if we still have not, if we still think that we have time, I do not know what to say. Because government and all that, what they will do, the common man has to work also. We have to take steps, all of us, each one of us. That's a simple man. The common man, he will actually, he can only, nobody else, nobody else. And that's why decentralization is something which is very, very important, very important. I have
Thank you,
answered the
ma'am,
question.
thank you, ma'am, for asking that crucial question of when is the time to start. As we have already gone beyond our allocated time, I apologize to our other participants who have asked questions for not being able to take it up. We will send those questions to our speakers and try to get the views on the same. So before I wrap up today's session, I would like to remind you that this webinar series continues till 17th of May, every Monday, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Our next session is on 12th April 2021, and the topic is Food for Thought Towards an Environmentally Sustainable and Socially Just Food Systems, where we will try to understand what it takes for everyone in the metropolis to return to consuming food that is healthy, locally grown, and environmentally sustainable. I request everyone present here to join us again next week and also share details about this webinar series among your networks. Recordings and reports of our previous sessions are accessible at our website www.esgindia.org. With this, I once again thank all our speakers for participating and in enriching and thought-provoking discussion. I'm also grateful to all our participants who registered for the session, the entire team at ESG, my colleagues, ESG interns, and volunteers from Yugma Network for helping us put together this webinar series and this session. I wish you all a very good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.